Hi. Mm. You want to get the levels? You want to get levels or? Oh. You're good?
Says the professional presenter.
I tell you. Hi.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce you. When I introduce you, do you want me to read the abstract along with the bio?
I need people to have this as a background for. Yeah, so.
So you want me to read it? It doesn't matter. No.
Don't matter.
I'll give them an
It's
idea.
there, yes. Yeah. Let me get some water out.
Good evening, everyone. Let's call
No further back. Yeah. That's the target.
Right, good evening again, and let's call this meeting to order. Just want to thank you all for coming out this evening. I know that it has been a fairly eventful day, and people may just want to stay home. But thank you all for coming out. This is a very important meeting because it's actually our 5th anniversary. Yes, we were launched. The group was launched on the 20th of March in 2014. And I want to thank those of you who have been with us from the beginning. We have some folks who are with us from the workshop stage, and they've made a transition to the group and still with us. Along the way, we've gained some new friends and supporters and members. So I want to thank you all for staying the course with us. I hope we can continue for another 5 years and another indefinitely in the future. Yes. So thank you all so much. I just want to get through a few preliminaries. As you know, at our last meeting, we had an election for the new executive, which was served from this year until 2021. So I just want to introduce the new executive. We have, I'm still the facilitator. Yeah. And Pat, Dr. Stafford, is my deputy. We have a new face. He's not here right now, but I guess he will come later. Angela Skeet is our education officer. Here's Angela. And we have Marie-Claire Leiter, our secretary. Linda Lewis, who has done yeoman service on our connections. She's no longer our information officer. At her request, she is now a floor member, but we want to also thank her for the work she has done for our newsletter. Let me start with the third volume, right? And the other floor member is Betty St. John. Or the new person on the executive is Nicholas Mears. He's not here at the moment, but I think he'll be coming later. He's our information officer, so he now has the job of compiling our connections. So I hope that you will assist him. If you're interested, submit articles, word search, genealogical related information. So that's the executive. We have a workshop coming up on April 6th. Several of you have signed up for the workshop. It is an introduction to FamilySearch.org. We still have a few places, so if you are interested, let me know. We also have a bus tour coming up on June 15th. Pat has, actually she's just sent me the route yesterday. And we are focusing on the northern section of St. Michael and St. James. I don't want to go into all the details now, but if you have an interest in that area, just let us know. So we'll be starting in that Cahill area, University. We're having lunch in Rockdando at Chris's place. We're trying to negotiate a surprise for you, so we hope that pans out. We'll be going to H Hill, Orange Hill, the whole town area, Western, West Nolan. So if you have any interest in those areas, let us know. And if you're interested in sharing about your family history and your family connections to the area, so just let me know. Okay, our next meeting is May 15th, and Dr. Watson will be presenting on a very interesting topic. He's looking at mining plantation field names for genealogical information. I don't know if you all know that the plantation fields, the different fields, all had names.
That is the problem.
Sorry?
I just realised there's a problem. The last meeting of the lecture series is on the 15th of May as well.
Oh yes, it's one, right. No, we have to make some adjustments because the lecture series this year kind of shifted to Wednesday, which is one of our days. So I didn't realize that one. Actually, our dates were in since last year, but we'll just make the shift, and we will have to have that meeting then on the Thursday instead. Okay, so that will be May 16th, and that will be Dr. Watson. So without further ado, just to remind you all, today is the first time we'll be live streaming the program. So we have people already in the chat waiting. So we want to get to the meat of the matter. So I will just call on Angela to introduce the speaker.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Hi. Editha Nancy Fergusson-Jacobs has celebrated 45 years as a graduate teacher and specialist lecturer in Caribbean history and culture and African art history. She has done much research on the intangible heritage and origins of the Barbados landship. She is the author of the book Full Stream Ahead, Locating the Barbados Landship, which ensures that the people of Barbados have a better understanding of their African origins. Dr. Jacobs spent 7 years in Grenada, where she was employed as a senior lecturer and developed several courses on aspects of Caribbean culture for the P.A. Marishaw Community College. She then became chair of the Department of Humanities, Arts and Culture until her return to Barbados in 2012. At present, she is an independent scholar who lectures on African art and culture and aspects of African heritage in the Caribbean. This evening, she will speak on using a will as a research tool. And to give you just a little bit of background on that, the will as a research tool is based on the will of Jahiel Pinheiro, a Jewish spinster in Barbados, whose significant information determines her friends, the events that formulates the bonds of her story of her life until her death, and what is left up until now. Being of the most prominent family of the Sephardic Jews in Barbados, she controls several properties in Swan Street. Though wheelchair-bound, she was still an iron force to be reckoned with, as she was known for her no-nonsense ploys and a business acumen. Jahir Pinero died during the Great Hurricane of August 11, 1831. Her accidental death at age 71 occurred exactly 1 month after her will had been lodged and signed before the governor. So I'm sure we'll be very interested in what you have to say.
Thank you very much. It went off?
Yeah, it went off by itself.
It would. Well, good evening again. Thank you all for having me this evening. I don't want it to seem as if we are there and I'm up here, and I would like us to be able to talk. I'm interested in doing more of a discussion, and I can give you the background to understanding how I came up with this information on Yael. I'm still always saying Yael and not Jael. You know, being a Jewish name, I had to also become acquainted with a lot of Jewish things. So that is one of the reasons why you might hear me say Yael sometimes, or Jael Pinero. So we have the first slide. Here is the will, the type of will that I found when I went to to the archives. Now, before getting to this point, I must say that I teach cultural studies, and one part of my class is that every student must find a topic, something in Barbados that they can do some research on, either going to the newspaper, coming here to the library, going to the archives, one of these areas. So sometimes some of the students say, but ma'am, I don't understand, I don't know what to look for. So, you know, sometimes you have to give them a little help. So that year we had a pretty rough set of hurricanes, and we were expecting them that they would have gotten worse. So I was telling them, I said, but you know, there was a hurricane that in 1831. They said, don't know anything about it. So I found the name of a book. It was of Stormy Seas by Schwartz. Their brain is going already. But anyway, the whole thing is I found this book that would give a recording of the 1831 hurricane in Barbados. And then there was another one that I had asked Professor Welch, and he had sent me a couple of pages. So I said, well, great. So I started to read before I sent it off to the student. And I came across the whole area about Fontebelle. Well, my family is from Fontebelle. And so I had an interest, a personal interest. And they were talking about 2 Jewish women who had died during the hurricane. But they had a little mix-up. You know, the idea of latter and former. Well, somebody got it wrong. So it was a name that was supposed to have been, that was a name that was supposed to have had all the money. This person was very wealthy and had these connections with the synagogue and so forth and so forth. And I said, well, let me find out from there if I could see the will. Because I had an idea that there would have been a will, because the information that was written. It would have to have been something there beforehand. Anyhow, couldn't find it with the first person. I said, all right, let's try the second person. And behold, it was the second person. Now, starting to get this information about Yael Pinero was at a time, and my cousin was in Barbados, and I was telling her about it. And she lives in Israel. She's married and lives in Israel. So I was able to, when she went back, I was able to talk with her on WhatsApp, and sometimes she would send me information. So here it is that when we start with looking at a will this size, it's about 4 times that will open. And it took me most of 2 weeks to actually write. Of course, you know you can barely touch it, right? So you have to write everything off. And these are some of the things that I found then that we would be able to look at as research tool. No, I said a research tool. And the first set of things I started to read in the will was she had set aside money, 40 guineas, for her cover, for her tomb, was to be white marble. So I said, okay, well, let's see if we could find this grave. And there I went and I spoke with Mr. Brewster at the synagogue at the time, and he said, I believe I know where her grave is. And so I said, well, we have all these nice graves and stuff, but he's not going in that direction, and he's taking me across the road. I said, what's this now? To find out that there are 9 graves very close by themselves. Here, as you can see, it is a plot near the corner of Lucas and James Street. And some of the things that would have been written there would have been like the Albert Theater was there at one point, next to where these where the tombs were. And then the telephone exchange was also on that spot. So that is some other information that we also could look at to find out exactly where these old things, these old buildings. But of course, none of them are there now. Yeah. So here we are looking at some of the notes. It's so, I don't know why it's so difficult for me to say J. Anyhow, Yael or Jael is Hebrew, and searching the name, it really means the strength of God, but the word is taken from a Nubian ibex. Nubian. And that started to make me think, Sephardic peoples were the darker skinned of the Jews, the dark ones. And here again, the letter J did not come into being until around 1600. So, you know, the first thing that the children would say to me, so what name you had for Jesus? I said, Yeshua. Oh, okay. But this is true. If we did not use the word J until 1600s. And then we had the surname, Pinero, from pine trees, pine groves. That was the name used. And those persons then that had come, the Sephardic traditions brought from Portugal on to Holland, then into Brazil. The other idea is that I found out, registration of births were not as important at that time until 1756, 64. And So we would find that burials were of more importance at that time. Some of the cultural differences that we would come out, we had to learn, well, I had to learn the meanings of a lot of the words. When you're reading in her will, she would say, you would give, say, 10 pounds or 15 pounds to purchase mourning. My cousin Stella, she helped me with that information about purchasing mourning, because if you are on a certain level of the society, you would have make sure that all of the persons attending the funeral would be able to dress suitably. So they would give money, and sometimes they even give rings and give you lots of different little things. Many of them are mentioned in the will. That's why I'm saying it is a treasure trove for any person to really have an idea and read a will. To read a will. Then the role of the shaman. I didn't know. I never knew what a shaman was. There were two persons that Yael had decided that she was going to ask them to be with her. If she's getting sick or you're getting ready to die, you should never be alone. So there are always two persons. That's what the shaman is. Persons who would remain with you. Because they are then the watchers over the body. And then until burial, that's what happens. You have to have some person there. So she had already decided on who would stay with her for that. So these are just some of the cultural differences. Wonder if I should say this now. Not only reading of the will and doing the research, you're looking at names and all of that, but I would get up at sometimes 2 or 3 in the morning, and something would just be telling me, go, start doing some work. And I'm saying, well, okay, Yael is around. I used to say, yes, she's around. One morning, I'll tell you, one morning I got up and I was told, because you remember, I'm just hearing a voice. I can't even say a voice that you can say it is Mark Anthony's voice, it is Myrna's voice. You can't tell, but it's a talking. And I was told, look for, in Hebrew, may she be bound in the bindings of life. I said, may she be bound in the bindings of life? Well, you know, that started me now searching the Bible. I never come across anything like that. So I got the translation. They even told me, check Google. And I did. So I found the Hebrew for that. May she be bound in the bindings of life. But I could not understand, and I couldn't tell anybody who told me about it, where I got the information from, so you understand what a predicament I was in a sense. And I was a little worried at that point. It took me some time. I mentioned it to my brother, who is now deceased. Actually, it's nearly a year that he's gone. Next Saturday will be a year he died. But he used to keep in touch with me all the time, every day. What did you find out today? What did you find out? So he was very interested in it. So I told him about this thing. I said, look, I don't know what to tell. I can't tell anybody about this occurrence. May she be bound in the bondings of life. He says, never mind about it. It will sort itself out. Continue. So I did that. I did. All right. Right. So I'm saying we have this lady called Yael, and we knew from her tombstone here, this is what was written on the tombstone. Well, the parts that I couldn't understand because it was really too badly damaged. And I'm hoping that they would be able to have some kind of restoration for her. All my bones shall say, O Lord, who is like unto thee? Sacred to the memory of Miss Yael Pinero, age 71, who was crushed. I did not know what came after that. At her residence near Holborns in Fontebelle during the tremendous hurricane with which it pleased God to visit this island on the morning of the 11th of August, 1831. And you see what's written underneath there? May she be bound in the boundings of life. So I obeyed. No, right. We go on to looking at, I said, was she a single woman? Yes, we said spinster. My students, of course, don't know what a spinster. Our children don't know. That's not a word in their vocabulary anymore. So I then checked with Shillstone's, E.M. Shillstone's registry, the Jewish registry. And because she was a spinster, I knew then that she would still have a connection with her father. And in trying to find these things in the burial registry, I came across then, found out she had a father, a mother, she had two sisters and 2 brothers. It's 5 of them and all. I said, what? I asked to even see some of the wills of her siblings and so forth. Nobody had money like her. Nobody had money like her. And it wasn't that they left for her. Not that they did at all. So look at the ages where they all died. Father and mother. Mother is Hannah and Jacob. Esther was the youngest daughter, and she died first. I think that sent the old man after that. He probably was heartbroken that she had gone. And then 2 brothers, Isaac Pinero and Joseph Pinero, and Luna. Luna died at 73. But look at it. All between the years 1803 and 1831, everybody died. Whole family gone. And we're saying, wow. It was something else that was happening that I haven't even been able to work that out as yet. Yeah, we could go on. So here we see the synagogue, Nidhi Israel. This synagogue was also damaged during the 1831 hurricane. And they collected over 2,000 pounds, which was all collected from Barbados, and it was reestablished on the 29th of March, 1832, or is it 33? 2 years it took. So the whole edifice and everything. So the reason why I put the Simhat David, because there's also a lot of talk about another synagogue being, I'm sorry, another synagogue being in Speightstown. But we have not got all the information as yet to say it is here or it was there. We're looking at Fontebelle. Fontebelle was very well known at that time for the governor's homes. There were 5 governors in Barbados that actually lived in Holborn. And then, of course, I took upon myself to find out when it changed and why it changed and all kind of things. Some men were afraid of living near the sea for lots of different reasons. Lots of different reasons. But so some of them then took it upon themselves that they wanted a different house to stay in until they decided on the one that is there now, which was a part of Pilgrim. Was a part of Pilgrim. That was where our Governor General's home is. Here again, I found a map because I wanted to find out the streets. Because there's a street known as Jew Street, which is now Swan Street. So we had to look at maps as well to see how Bridgetown was actually developed and everything. So we had to look at a lot of different things. Also because there were fires. Had about 4 fires or so, all the way down to St. Mary's Wall. They had fires. So then the use again of brick instead of using wood, because that would be one of the things that would have prevented flames and fire from spreading. Yes, so here we get to early Swan Street or Jew Street. The home where Yael lived was number 10 Swan Street. And downstairs, because I'm trying to say, well, how did she make her living? But she had a shop. She had a trading shop. So she sold all kinds of things, from candelabras to smelling salts to buttons and all, like a haberdashery, what we would say a haberdashery. And that was downstairs. But I believe she was a fairly stout woman, so she would have had to have had some person to move her about in her wheelchair. And I looked also to find out about wheelchairs. Yes, they were used up, even in this time. Yeah, up to, from the 1700s. So here is number 10 Swan Street. No, this is Cherish. This is where Yael's home was. This is where her home was. And the reason why I have Jacob Belgrave, the second, well, I'm going to get into a little trouble about him. But it is written that she had given a young guy, a young boy, 50 pounds. You know, it's 50 pounds? In that day and age, 50 pounds. Well, we trace back again how many Jacob Belgraves there were. Gee, was plenty. Plenty. But this one was a little boy. And I believe it was his grandfather who was the first Jacob Belgrave that had actually owned, and he had actually owned the property in Fontebelle that she had got her property from. So she probably knew him, that little boy, and she decided to leave him 50 pounds in her will. So the hurricane of itself, when you start to read some of the ideas from the Samuel Hyde, his account of the fatal hurricane, he actually intimated that she had slaves and she had people who lived with her, and that they had purposely left her to die. I was not of that opinion for many reasons. First of all, being a Jew and one that, followed the tenets and so forth, she kept to this idea of, if you are a Jew, you can't have a slave. You can't have a slave. You would have to have like a servant. And if you're having a servant in your household, a male servant, to serve you, he had to be Jewish. So he had to be circumcised, go through all the rituals and everything of being a Jew, because many of her servants then were offered the same idea about to purchase mourning. They were allowed that. So they were Jews. They were Jews. One of the things that we find in her will is also about having to make sure they were manumitted. My story is now unfolding again. The manumission of the slaves. But I loved how the language was used by the governor of this time. And he explained about the hurricane. No language of mine is adequate to express sufficiently its horrors. The peals of thunder and the rapidly repeated flashes of lightning, more like sheets of fire, and the impenetrable darkness which succeeded then. The crash of walls, roofs, and beams were all mixed in appalling confusion, and the whole house shook to its very foundation. Now, tell me, if this was an unusual behavior, we're here with just one little light on now, you could imagine hearing all of that noise. And where Yael was in her wheelchair, the winds pushed her out of her chair. And the roof came down on top of her. Tell me, who brave enough to go out there? Who is brave enough with, you say, sheets of like fire, and you are not accustomed to seeing these kind of behaviors? You think you will be able to creep out from your little place where you're hiding from the wind and rain and everything to go out to see after anybody? But that was the story that they had left. Then Mr. Brian T. Young, he also added, the hurricane lasted in its utmost fury about 8 hours, from about midnight to the hour of 8 o'clock in the morning. And oh, what a work of destruction was perfected during that brief period. And of course, being Jewish, she was dead. She had to be buried right the next day. And it was written that they took her, although it had so much problems in getting through and so forth, they took her for burial in that little area that she had paid for. It was also part of their family plot. But I understand that there were some things that happened which have not really been released, that either her father or her brothers, because remember, we have the recurring names and it was Pinero. Actually, they were cut off from the synagogue because of some things that happened. They were working and they were serving in the synagogue of itself. So they did not have the same type of burial as if they had worked. I'm just not trying to say the words as clearly because I am not sure. I'm still doing research. You know, this is something that's ongoing, and I'm trying not to make the mistakes that some of our other historians have made. I'm not making up any stories, and I'm not doing anything like this. Okay. Yes, so we are looking at the conclusion of what's happening here. We can't ascertain how many executors actually carry out their instructions with respect to slave heirs, nor do we know whether white heirs successfully contested certain bequests or indeed the manumissions themselves. Judging from 18th and early 19th century evidence and from indications in 17th century sources, when non-whites litigated for their freedom, whites could and did use various devices to frustrate manumission, and that is Jerome Handler. Now, some of the quotations and the books that I used would have been Olmixon, Schomburg, and Shilstone. Those are just some of my main persons that I resorted to using to check on these things. But guess what? I found out, and only just today, I found out that the executor of the will, Lionheart, did ensure that the slaves, 8 slaves, were manumitted. Yes, George Thomas. No, as you see the names, George Thomas, he would have to have been a colored man, meaning he is mulatto most likely. Edward Ben, colored. Tell me what you're noticing. Solomon, African. John, African. Fanny, Molly, Ellen, and Jane, all of these were slaves. They had one name. I was just going to say a bad word. Going back to, what's his name? Huckleberry Finn? Mm-hmm. Yes. Having one name. One name. I don't think it bothers us too much in Barbados to say the word nigger, negre. But George Thomas, Edward Ben, these are all male names, and they had a surname. Solomon, right? And then some of them, most of these would have been young. Some of them were like 2.5 years old. So they were actually being cared for until, and I'll tell you, she made sure that all of her slaves, when they were manumitted, they had monies. Money that they didn't reach the age of 18 as yet. Whenever they reached that age, they would have had all of the money that had been left to them. And the interest, she was very particular about that thing called interest. And we see that Lionheart had all of this work done and executed by May 3rd, 1832. Thank you to my beloved friend, a neighbor from Fontebelle. So these are the at the very top you can see there, that's Lionheart, where he had executor of the will. Oh yes, if you could go up a little bit more. But anyway, you can see all the names. It's on this side. Yes, on the right hand side. Right. Return of Hart Leon of slaves, the property of Yael Pinero, and to whom he is executor. So these are the names. See, Ellen, 2.5 years. She was colored. But being a female again, they didn't give them another name. One name. Edward Ben. He was like 8.5. So, see, they were very young. And then she had made arrangements that the older ones would look after the younger ones. You know? So, and she had all of these 8 then manumitted. There was also a man who worked for her. He had a different name at first. He was a Thomas Grogan, but he was then changed to Henry Pinero. He took her surname. And the main house, because there were about 4 properties on Swan Street that she had, and she left all of the monies and so forth, she left to them. And this is the areas that we have come to, well, at least I've come to, and realized that I now have to cross the Great Divide to find out now about these manumitted slaves. What happened? Did they get the properties? They were manumitted, but did they get the properties that they were supposed to get? So this is where I am at now in terms of having to go to the Barak building, as we call it, to get the information, to see if these things held true. So as I'm saying, it is still a work in progress that I am sharing with you. I hope that I have been able to, if you have any questions and so forth, know that we could possibly deal with at this stage.
What was the name of the building you just called?
I said, yeah. Right. The Barak building? Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Is that the government headquarters? And what is
No,
there?
it's in Warrens. So it's where all of the properties, property taxes,
Okay.
and so forth would have been.
Going all the way back.
Yes, going all the way back. But I already been told that between 1810 and 1840, can't find anything.
Okay. But
It's not there.
Sorry, don't believe that. Because some of the things you can't find, but some of the things you can find.
Okay.
A lot of the property read books are closed, but not all. So
Right.
don't give up.
Okay. Good, thanks. Yes.
Thank you very much for a very informative presentation. You have said a number of things which got me thinking.
Oh boy.
Number one is the ancestors.
Yes.
a number of us do not understand the importance of the ancestors
Mm-hmm.
and how they work.
And how they work. They're still working.
It's still working very much.
Still working.
But I'm a bit, I'm interested in the fact that in 1661, when the government of Barbados introduced the slave code
Mm-hmm.
to say that black people were not human beings, they are property. So her life would have had to take that into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right.
Because to do other would be just like breaking the law and breaking what was known.
Yes.
But I can see how she, as a Hebrew Jew,
Mm-hmm.
would have been struggling to honor the principles of the Jewish, what we call the Jewish faith. I could see that.
Mm-hmm.
I also like the idea that 1831 that the hurricane, 1731.
1830. Yeah, 1831.
Because I'm familiar with the second hurricane in 1870, 1898 it was,
Mm-hmm. That's the last
the
one
last one.
Yeah. at that time.
And up to last night, I mentioned to Dr. Carter that we need to do a social impact study on Hurricane Janet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you describe the kind of catastrophe that happened in 1831,
Mm-hmm.
then in 1898,
In 19 and then 1950,
right?
56, 55, 1955.
I mean,
Janet.
fast forward, you know,
Oh, yes.
the second one after
Mhm.
1831, then 1898, and then now to Jeanette, right?
Yeah. Yes.
We need to understand, as you said, if the ancestors teaching us a lesson, if the ancestors is also preparing us for something. That is why I was just telling a colleague here that I'm doing some research. Of all the people who lived and died in 1955, Hurricane Janet, to present. That's what I'm doing now.
Okay.
So I can see the importance of this lecture, with your presentation, with what is presently going on here at the museum, with the Windrush generation, because Hurricane Janet would have pushed so many Barbadians
Changes.
up to England, and now the government is asking them to come
To
back.
come back, yeah.
So I'm just trying to make those
You're looking at Windrush, yeah. Okay, thanks. Anybody? Yes, please.
I want to re-emphasize you at the end you said Robert Stromberg, and yes, I wanted to share that with everyone that his book really is
Fantastic.
an excellent, persons here interested, an excellent report on that hurricane. And
Yes.
the situation at that time, I also had to study that because of the fact that in 1831, so many enslaved people were affected, and it was obviously an opportunity to willingly move around, to maybe reconnect, to get away, just prior to 1834.
Yes.
But it was also an opportunity for persons with devious needs to remove especially infants and young children, from one location
To another, yes.
in order to pay them in 1834 and receive money, because that was what it was all about.
Yeah.
People were money. So 1831 hurricane speaks to everyone probably in this room who has ancestry in Barbados.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to 1834. I have that in my story, my research, but everyone being on them there. The other thing, Nancy, is you probably have picked this up today, that Charlotte, who was 75 years old, colored. You probably picked this up. Her country was given as Africa.
Africa.
And I think that's an important thing that I wanted to share. To see that
Yes.
because it will speak of the fact that an African, she was African colored. So she was born in African color, enslaved and brought across the
Yes, they were.
75 years old.
Yes.
When she not died, when she
Was manumitted.
devised
Well, devised, yeah. It was the, yeah, it was named. Pinero.
and so too John was
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you is whether in your research you made any contact with Pineros, people who carry that name.
I tried. I called. There was a Pinero who lived in Oystons at Christ Church side, but I have not been able to, with the telephone lines, I haven't been able to get through to anybody so far. I've called a couple of times.
I was interested to hear your response on that because I know it's Lanes Road and also Farm Road in St. Philip, telephone directory 2019. But the Pineros lived, a family of Pineros lived between Welch's there in St. Michael and Mylar's Hill. When you leave the post office and you're going to Mylar's Hill on the right hand side, the house is now owned by, it was bought by the husband and wife. He was a politician, the one who had the operation who were black patch for a little while. I can't remember his name. He represented St. James. And there was a sale at that house, the Pinero's house. And I went to it. So I know some of the glassware and different things. So when I read your thing, I thought to myself, I wonder if you know one piece.
You're right.
Passing by and was on
You're
that
right.
table and it passed by.
Well, I didn't think so much about the things being left, you know, there. But what I was looking at was the way how she understood about freeing or having servants and still having them, well, they're still there as slaves. And so I went back because I said I was going to say the Jewish laws that instructed that slaves were to be treated as or like an extended family, as they were seen as part of the master's household. From Exodus 20, and Deuteronomy also gives all those instructions. They emphasize circumcision of their slaves, Exodus 12. And most importantly in this situation, they may inherit the master's estate, especially where there are no other offspring left. That's from Genesis 15. Accordingly, slaves may acquire and own material goods and property of their own. Now, this is an important thing, which meant that she could own slaves, but she could rent them out. And the money that they make is theirs. Is theirs. So you understand now how that really helped with the prosperity of her house, because I'm still trying to figure out, all right, so she had a trade going on with things, because don't forget, being Jewish as well, she would have others coming in, and they would have brought things from Holland and all kinds of things, wines and cheeses, and all of those things came from Europe. came into Barbados, and these were things that they sold and had there in the house. But at the same point in time, her slaves were farmed out. They could go and work. They could sell, things like that, and came back home. They could go and work for another person for a while and come back. So that was the kind of relationship she had with their slaves. And that's why I would say that persons, Samuel Hyde, who was saying that they purposely left her to die, I don't think that they would have done that. They were cared in such a way, you know, that it would not have been normal. It would not have been human to leave some person that you know is in a wheelchair and can't fend for themselves, and they got damaged, and you don't do something to help. But but would they have known at the time? Don't forget, her will was only lodged on the 11th of July, and she died exactly a month after.
The thing too, Nancy, is that when you look at that return, it is absolutely clear, and the other ones, it's absolutely clear that if Mr. Leon, is it
Hart Leon, yeah, he was Jewish as well.
Yeah, and
so.
you would have known if they had responded or not. The mere fact that they got everything in the will, everything in the will is carried through. All the manumissions are there. And,
yes.
You saw all of it. So.
And I saw all of the.
That statement was quite, malicious.
Yes, that was.
It was malicious.
It was. But the thing is, all of the monies from what she would have sold that she had in the shop, all of those things were also put in easily. So she would have been a millionaires in our terms. She had plenty of money. Yes.
But from our social media, we have some comments. Terry P wants to say thank you for the information. It was priceless. Bill Hearn said such a one excellent presentation. We also have a question from Cynthia C, and she wants to know whether or not the bill referred to her as Jewish.
Yes. Yes. Because the first thing that they do is to send money for the synagogue. And not only for Barbados, but also there's one also in England. She sends money also for them. Oh, I forgot to say something. Oh, you asked your question. Two persons.
How do you know about manumission if people were manumitted? Is it in the slave returns?
Yes, well, that is the thing we had to find out about first, and then to see if they were given the houses and all of that they were supposed to get. So, but that one came. I would have to ask. Can you give any more on it?
I think I might be able to help you on that one. Yes, there you go. The archives do have manumissions. Sometimes they have their own deeds, and from say 1832 to 34, there is a specific file of manumissions. But the problem is, of course, that if you read Hamlet, you'll notice from I think it's 1808, it was also possible to manumit people in England, because here it was very expensive. Because what had happened, of course, was manumission started in the 1700s, but some planters, saw an old person who couldn't work anymore, so they just kicked them out, and they were destitute. So there then came in a law that you had to have them, if you manumitted a person, you have to pay an annuity through parish vestry. And that's right. And if you did, or if you didn't want to do that, an alternative thing you could do was to go get the deeds to England and get people manumitted in England. So
Yes.
we can't always find a manumission. You can't sometimes find a manumission because, as Nancy said, she's been told a lot of the deeds
Have been, yeah.
Of course, remember the word property. Slaves were seen as property.
Property.
And the property deeds, a lot of the property deeds from that period are no longer available because they are crumbled into little pieces
Crumbled,
of paper.
yeah.
So,
They didn't digitalize them.
not, I think some of them were too late. It got to the
Too
stage
late,
where
yeah.
I think one or two of us have probably been to the archives and been handed a book, and you turn the page, and suddenly you realise
It's crumbling.
It's crumbling, and you don't know whether you should say, "Sorry, I really oughtn't to be looking at this," or you think, "I'm the last person who's got the chance, so I'm going to do it anyway."
Yes.
Does that help?
Yes, of course.
I have one comment. During the hurricane, it must be something so catastrophic this than what you said. And if the roof fell in on her house, I mean, it kind of tells you that she was pretty well off. She probably had a well-built house. But all the other people and all the other servants that she had, their places may have been destroyed. So
That's right.
it leads you to believe that there's nobody that could come and rescue her anyway.
But they wanted the people who were in the same house with her, who were there with her, because she didn't live alone.
Right,
but they wanted her to move her. They wanted to move her from under the stuff.
But when a whole roof collapses like that, it takes
Yes.
an unbelievable number of people from the outside
That's
to
right.
move the house, to remove the debris.
And it's in the dark.
And it's in the dark.
That's quite true.
Yes, that's right.
True.
But
Yeah.
uncovered it the next day to find
Yes.
her, then to found out that she was dead.
And she was gone.
Based on your return, that was right there in black and white, up to today, 2019, up to this morning, right, Nancy?
Yes, that's right.
So it's proved, Nancy now has proved that what that statement is, the facts are here. And the facts go on too. You can share that as well.
But I was only going to say, can I remember what it was I was going to say about the, my brain went to too many different places. One of the things about this story, when I found out what may she be bound in the bindings of life, when I found out what it was, They usually put on the tombstone on the anniversary of the death, the following year. And that is when she was covered. And part of the prayer which is given is, may she be bound in the bindings of life, may she rest in peace. And I did not know, it's only then, and it just like had me, my skin was walking. I said, oh gosh, look how long it took me to realize I was given this thing, may she be bound in the bindings of life. And I could not find out what it was. What was this all about? Until it was really to release her, to let her go. Yeah.
We have another question from Cynthia C. She said, to speak to her wealth, did any of the records you research indicate how much money she had and exactly
Yes.
how many properties she had acquired?
Yes, she had 4 properties. I'm trying to find out where I wrote it. Oh, she had about £7,900. Equivalent to That's about £500,000 in present money in the UK, according to the conversion tables used. And she had some real high class lawyers. Barton, Earlham, and Higginson were the lawyers in England, and they also worked here. So that's one part of the question, yes. And also at the end, yes, she had 4 properties. One was from her aunt, who was Rachel Pinheiro, that came to her. And then she had she bought from different persons and so forth. So she had 4. And she says who was to get what, and who was to get the tea and the silverware and all of those kind of things. I mean, it was fascinating to think of. I didn't know what was a Montes.
What?
Montes. It is a silver bowl which was used for keeping the glasses cold. Yeah. I think I had it written in the article. Yeah. Yeah. So, and my aunts, when I think in present day 1900s, my aunts lived opposite where she would have been living. You see where there was Manning or the Costa, right there, so opposite Holborn, right? My aunts lived there. So, so to me, that was information that I also found that I treasured, by saying Fontebelle, and I'm finding, all of this information about them. And her, I think I was able to probably do something that she didn't have done, that she needed. Yes, please.
You said you were using the will as a tool to go into the genealogy of this person. From the will, were you able to tell what her parent or siblings did at the time in Barbados?
Yes. I had quite a bit of information. Her father, they worked, well, he was an officer in the synagogue. That's what I will say. But at the end, it seems that he was supposed to return some things which he did not return. And that is what caused the big hue and cry. And they took them off of the books and whatnot. And I believe that is why she decided to leave that piece of property as for her burial. Because it was not really within. It was not within. There were about 5 cemeteries, And another thing that I had to learn was 2 persons are never buried in the same grave at any time. It's only one. So anytime you go in there, you can count and see how many people died. If you wanted to check tombstones, you would know how many people died within a certain between 1900 and whatever. You could find out all of that information. No 2 was never dug up and put another person in there. Never. Never. So you would have had to have been looking for new property all the time for burial.
Are all the cemeteries in that area?
Pardon?
5 cemeteries.
5 cemeteries make up, yes,
okay.
That make up there for the synagogue. 5 different places. So I was so shocked when they're taking me to go and see the grave, and we going opposite, we going across the road. I said, where are he going? Until I got to see this place.
Nancy?
Yes.
You said you were looking for
family
Yes.
had some difficulty in finding.
Yes, here.
I know in Trinidad that Pinero family.
I heard so.
resides there, and they still have people there from that ancestry in Trinidad.
It's possible. But there was somebody who lived right there. So as I said, just up there where we lived, where we used to go to school. Huh? Yeah, I see. Yeah. The Rodriguez, yeah. Actually, yeah. But you know, actually, one of them buried, Joy's, one of them was buried, is today? Or is tomorrow, something. Rodriguez. And they're also family to Pinero. Haha, I see.
In my work that I'm doing, because Austin is a very narrow strip.
Yes.
And it starts from the Peniers.
It starts from the
Peniers in Austin.
From the Pineros in Austin?
Yes.
Oh gosh. Well, there we go.
Above the road above Penier House. And that
I didn't know where it's Pinero. Oh yeah, I know it's Scarborough because I went the foundation.
Right.
Foundation, so
Peniers in
yeah.
Austin starts at the beginning of Austin and it ends where Shepherd is now.
Wow.
That is Austin. Because
Yeah.
the road below Shepherd, that is Bell Chase.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a very narrow strip.
Wow.
So the Peniers is raising its head again. Yeah.
Pineros, yeah. Well, we have to do some. Well, I'm glad that we've got this idea again that we can. Unfortunately, excuse me, but it gets me very emotional. So, Pineros, and all of the names. You know, Pat, when you were saying about having manumissions in England, there were two persons that she had that she didn't have manumitted here. Jessie and Ali, or Albi. Yes. They were on the list, but they were supposed to be manumitted in England. Yep, in England. So, well, yes, please.
Any other questions or comments for Nancy?
Two things from on our social media. Last two things. One person, Rodney B, is saying yes, in Trinidad there are Pineros living in Port of Spain and they were business owners here. And we have from Donna B. She's asking, she said and asked, the British government never notified her family in the 1950s that their relative died in the British World War and took the property. She wants to know, is there a way to find out what British law was at that time to notify the family, and wouldn't there be a break in the chain of title?
Well, that's a law. Yeah, that's a legal. That will have to be a legal question. No, that they have to do some research on. Yeah.
Right, okay. That has been really interesting. I have to confess, I have been interested in this topic ever since I saw Nancy in the archives and she said I found this really interesting will. So I also have to confess that I actually read her article, which everybody else who hasn't actually read it already can read in the journal, the museum journal that came out in
December.
Right. And I think it is something. I've read many wills, and sometimes I've wondered about them. You know, why on earth do you have to be buried at 9 o'clock at night? Something like that.
Yeah.
But I've never actually thought in terms until I read this article. I've heard this today. I never thought about just how much you can actually gather from a will in terms of the whole the family, the social scene in which that person has lived, and the wider community at the time, And I think it's really exciting that Nancy has done this and has been able to share it with us. And it's also nice that she's still going to find out more, and maybe we can invite her back.
Thank you. Yes, I really have to. This is really a push now for the part 2.
Right.
For the part 2.
Next.
Yes.
2020 part 2. Okay. So thank you very much indeed for your presentation.
Thank you very much for having me.
Before we adjourn, I just have 2 things to bring to your attention. First of all, Nicholas, can you please stand up?
Mr. Mears.
Right at the back. This is Nicholas Mayers, who we wanted to introduce to everybody as the new information person who is going to make sure that we have an absolutely wonderful Connections magazine, just hopefully as good as the one we did anyway. So if anybody has anything they want to get to him, please let him know, or let Harriet know, and she will make sure that the article arrives at the door. Would you like to say anything?
I found that the lecture, that was a very good presentation. It has really opened up my eyes about using those as research tools. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
The other thing I'd like to just say is anybody who came in late, could they speak to Harriet before we go? And the final thing I have to say is thank you to apart from Nancy, who we have great thanks for, but also thank you Harriet Waterman and Mary Claire Library, because they have provided some refreshments that we can get on the outside. So, before you go, thank you Nancy.